Steve's mentioned to you that pumpkin pie today is not the pumpkin pie that we used to have, that we didn't always have refined pie crust made with lard, vegetable shortening, or vegetable oil as we try to use today. What we always did was put it in a regular pumpkin shell. What we're doing today is, again, not quite the traditional kind of pumpkin pie because it's not going to be something sweet. It's going to be savory, which also might have been more probable to come across in days past. What we're doing today could have been done with any of these sizes of pumpkin, and the recipe I'm using is a vegetable-filled pumpkin, and you could use it with this large-sized pumpkin or this very small-sized pumpkin, but you would need to adjust the filling quantities in order to do that. Now what we're going to do is use a medium-sized one for the product we're working with today, and our skillet is already warm, and I'll turn it down just a little bit so it doesn't get too smoky. Now in order to save time, one of the hard things to do with pumpkin is to cut the thing open, because often the shell is hard because it's a hard-shelled squash. What I'm going to do is cut it open and cook it with the seeds inside, and that'll make the filling softer. It will also hold the shape of the pumpkin a little bit more. So I've made two 1-inch cuts, one on each side, and then I'm just going to cut around the top so that I connect both of those, just as if you were making a jack-o'-lantern. Now the next stage on this will be to pull this out and make sure that you at least cut through all of these strings. The reason that I've done that is not because it's going to make the pumpkin cook any better, but it's going to make it a lot easier for us to test to tell when it's done. If I don't, when it's cooked in the oven for a period of time, I'm going to lift the lid up a little bit and test the meat here with a fork to see if it's gotten tender. And if I haven't disconnected those, it gets a lot more tough, and I end up pulling it apart while it's cooking in the oven. And you can probably tell I'm talking from experience. So trust me on this one. This is what you need to do. Make life a little bit easier. Now this is then going to go into the oven either somewhere between 350 and 400 degrees until it's done. And you're going to have to experiment with that to see how long that's going to take, because it may take somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour and a half based on the temperature you've chosen. If you're cooking it with something else, for instance, you may want to save electricity and cook it at a lower temperature or a higher temperature. So you're going to have to test it from time to time. Probably don't need to start testing with one this size until you've gone about at least a half an hour. I cooked this one, or this size, for about 375 degrees for about 35 minutes, and it was fine. One thing, it doesn't have to be completely tender because we're going to cook it a little bit more after we stuff it. Now this one then is going to go into a shallow pan and go into the oven. Now we have one that's already done. Now notice this one, it doesn't look quite as pretty because it has cooked and it's shriveled a little bit. You'll expect that with the cooking. I've gone ahead and seeded it and taken the strings out. Now one of the things you'll need to be a little bit careful is that where it's sat on the bottom is going to be a little bit soft because it's cooked a little bit more there because the heat has gone directly there. So you're going to have to work a little bit carefully with that as you go along. Now we're going to keep that handy. And we're going to go ahead and start the inner ingredients, or the stuffing ingredients. We're going to put in about 1/3 cup of onion. And I'm just going to go ahead. This will probably stuff 2 of these, as I said. Now normally we would let this saute for about 3 minutes, but we're going to go ahead and pretend that this has gone ahead and softened up. You could use dried onion if you chose to, but the fresh tastes a little better. We're also fortunate in that we have some of the fresh green beans from the garden. Now normally at Thanksgiving time you're not going to have too many fresh green beans from your own garden, so you're going to want to use some of those that you've frozen earlier on in the year. These would go ahead and be used the same way because we're going to steam them basically. We're adding no fat to this. We had 1½ cups of frozen or fresh green beans if you had them, and then we didn't have fresh corn, so we've got about 1 cup of corn. Remember, this is a casserole type of dish, so if you don't have something, or you want to substitute, or you want to change the amount of ingredients, there's no problem with doing so. Now to that, we're going to add somewhere between 2 tablespoons to 1/4 cup of red sweet pepper, and about 3 tablespoons of canned green chilies, and choose the hotness based on how hot you think people are going to like this. This makes a real nice dish at the holiday time. And one of the nice things that you could do this, because it is a casserole, is you could add leftover meat to this. Leftover chicken or turkey or beef, whatever you happen to have, and it will continue to add flavor to the dish and make it a main dish. Now we're going to add 1/4 teaspoon of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of cumin, 1/4 teaspoon of chili powder, and again this could be adjusted to your family's likes and dislikes, and about 1/8 teaspoon of fresh ground pepper to that. We'll let these saute together with and just for a moment to soften up, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the lid on. These are then going to cook for about 12 minutes. Check your vegetables every now and then to make sure that you don't overcook them, because we want to try and maintain the color. Plus, they're going to go in the oven and cook a little bit longer. Now, if this pumpkin was still warm from the oven, if you'd taken the strings and the seeds out while it was still warm, then you could put these in and it would be able to shorten the cooking time. It's really a simple matter now of going ahead and stuffing this loosely. You don't have to try and pack it down. Put it in the oven at 375 for about 30 minutes, which would enable you to put it in with something else and cook a little bit too. Now remember that temperature and time can change a little bit as well based on what you have. Now one of the things that you want to do when people serve this, because it is something that you want them to eat the pumpkin, because the pumpkin is a very nutritional part of this dish as well, you want to remind them that they don't just use this as a bowl and eat the inside out. You want them to eat the bowl too, everything but the filling, or but the peel, so that give them a spoon and let them go ahead and scrape the sides. Set the top back on here, put it in the oven, let it get warm through, and you'll be ready to eat it. Now this becomes a very nutritious meal. It's ecological. If you've got kids that are interested in saving the world, you can almost eat the plate on this. In fact, if you use some of the smaller pumpkins like this, you could serve individual servings and let them really enjoy eating right out of the utensil. There'd be very little to wash too, which is another thing that kids like about this. High in beta-carotene, high in fiber, high in vitamin A and vitamin C. We hope you enjoy this one at the holiday season. For Oklahoma Gardening, this is Barbara Brown.